Hello and welcome to this episode of the Parents in PR podcast hosted by the PRCA. I'm Alex Stevens, founder of Parents in PR and business director at Reuben, Sinclair, and today I am joined by George Blizzard. George has an incredibly impressive bio. She is the co-founder of the PR Network, a global comms agency with clients including Toyota and Dropbox. She's been included in the PR Week Power Book 4 consecutive years in a row, served on the Women in PR committee and ran their mentoring program, and was recently awarded the inaugural GWPR and Eco Angela Oakes Award, recognizing women who have smashed glass ceilings and changed the game for empowering female leadership. And most impressive of all, she's done all of this while raising 3 daughters, now aged 18, 17 and 10. George, thank you so much for joining me. And I am exhausted just talking about all of that you've achieved. You're quite literally a superhuman. How do you have time to do it all?
I'm blushing. Thank you for having me.
No worries.
I don't do any of it particularly well, so that's probably how.
I don't believe that for a second. I can't imagine that. And I guess that sort of is one of the questions that we do get asked quite a lot as working parents. Like, how do you have it all? Is there a way to have it all, or do you have to kind of sort of trade off at any one time?
Definitely, there's trade-offs. I think anyone that says you can have it all is probably setting a very high bar. I think it's just about choices, though, and the luxury of choices. So, as you know, Nikki and I set the PR network up. Actually, it's before I became a mum, but we definitely saw that there wasn't really an option. We saw lots of amazing women leave the industry or leave full-time employment, or walk away from the career they love because they couldn't have it all. And they chose to be a parent instead, or they chose for a different life to move outside of London or whatever that might be. We're going back, nearly 20 years now, so things have changed. But it is super hard. I think you always, in all honesty, as a working mum, or working parent, I think you do always feel like you aren't doing everything brilliantly, because you feel like you're either not a full-time parent or a full-time employee. And I think that is hard, but there are ways of making that better. And, Nikki and I, we're big advocates for job sharing, which I think is a brilliant way of trying to have it all, having a partner in your work life as well as your home life that helps you share that load. And that's kind of what we've done for 19 years now.
Absolutely, and it's quite an unusual thing still in the PR industry, I think, to do that job share. So why do you think that is? Why is the PR industry slightly behind the curve on that?
I don't know. I think actually lots of industries are. You see it quite often actually in teachers. I think the teaching profession, perhaps because there are such, naturally attracts people who want to be parents, and so perhaps that over time has forced that change. But it's so rare you meet anyone who has a job shared. Nikki and I, we've job shared consistently for 19 years. We've split it 3 days each, and we changed the way that's worked as well. We've had the luxury of being able to say, actually, I'll do the beginning of the week, you do the end of the week based on the childcare requirements. But now we both work the same days and we kind of split the role. So it's different rather than time, it's splitting role. But I think PR, we're all people pleasers. I think and I'm talking mainly from the agency perspective, I haven't worked in-house, but I think we feel that we have to always be on because of the nature of the job, that there is rapid response times, there's often urgent responses needed or crises. And I think we feel that there has to be this 24/7 approach. Now, reality, I don't think there needs to be a 24/7 approach. I think on the whole, you might have periods where it's like that and you can work around that. But really, I think it's perfectly acceptable that people should be able to work with 2 people across the week. And a client, I think, would be absolutely comfortable with that, knowing they have the cover, but it being 2 people as opposed to 1. Now, for us, we think there's a brilliant benefit from having 2 people. 2 brains are always better than 1, right? And I think there's a diversity of thought. We are both different people, although we started dressing the same over the years. We are actually very different. She's got a different take on things than I would have. So our clients, our team, our colleagues all benefit from, when they talk to us, we have the shared values, but we have a different approach. So I think that clients would always benefit from that. So I don't understand why it's not more of an option. And also, I think perhaps from a recruitment point of view or an HR point of view, it probably is harder because Nikki and I set this up as a job share, and very much it's a bit like a marriage. We have I think you have to be in the same place at the same time. We have to have an understanding of the other person's perspective as well, and what their worries are or their life situation is. So I think it does need careful curating, I suppose. We were just lucky it kind of was organic for us. I mean, we
You
just met
almost
on it.
need to find your partner and come as one.
I think that would be the way to do it is, yeah. And I think actually in advertising, they do that a
They
lot in
do.
creative directors. They come as a team. And I'd love to see more of that because actually, I think that kind of team approach is brilliant. If you can, Nikki and I have been through, recessions, COVID, pandemics, whatever, the whole births, deaths, marriages, divorces, the whole thing. And actually having each other has made us, I think, do the job better because we've been able to lean on each other. And I think all partnerships are great, aren't they?
So important to have another person to be able to lean on and advocate for what you're doing as well. I know part of the flexibility that you set up within the PR network was the virtual nature of the PR network, and you kind of did working from home before it became a thing. It became a bit more of a thing during COVID, well, a big thing during COVID. Yeah. But how do you think that has contributed to your ability to support working parents, and I guess contributed to your success as a working parent?
Being able to be virtual and
yes, yeah.
Right. I think massively. I think, in terms of the clients, they've been benefiting from the fact that we have brilliant people no matter where they're based. So we're able to select the best person for the project. So I think that works really well. I think supporting, 65% of our network are female. So when we talk about our network, we talk about our freelance associate network. So I think for them, one person in particular who's been with us since the early days, she was in a job she didn't particularly enjoy. She was going back after her first maternity leave, and she was basically being sidelined. She now has gone on to work pretty much full time for us, although at that point she wanted part-time, build a career, change a sector experience. So for her, she's actually grown her career, but in her terms, which I think is super exciting. Yeah, and I think that, again, it's that kind of, we talk about it with the job share bit, being able to build teams of people who have requirements to work on certain days has benefited that entire freelance approach. And the client hasn't suffered, but the client's actually gained from it because they're getting the best people no matter where they are. And that, that diversity of thought I talk about, I think it's a no-brainer for us.
That's really good to hear, and I think it just shows that it can work. I think with the rise of some companies saying that they're going to have more people in the office more days a week, it seems we're sort of taking a little bit of a step back. But it's so wonderful to hear that you guys have made it work for so long as well. It's such a hugely successful agency over such a long period of time.
Yeah, it's one of the things we didn't want to compromise on when we set up. We always be virtual. We stayed true to that, and always have that flexibility. And I think we stay true to that too.
That's amazing. So what about the positive influence being a parent has had on your career? Do you think actually that some of the traits that you have kind of discovered in yourself as a parent, has that made you a better PR practitioner, for example?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. And I think it's something you don't think about at the time. You're worried about the negatives, but actually so many positives. I think, again, it comes back to having a different perspective. Particularly if you're communicating to an audience, I think, a parenting audience, having that background, that understanding, hugely important. But equally, I think you are more empathetic to your team. I think you understand, particularly if you're managing people who are parents. I had this amazing woman who worked for me many years ago, 20 years ago, and she had children, and I had no understanding the stress that she went through. So her child was off sick, and I was like, oh, no big deal. But actually, being that person, I now can understand that actually I didn't handle that very well, to my shame. And I had no realization what it is like to be a working parent. So I think as a manager, it improves you, makes you more empathetic. I think as a PR person, it means you've got a broader understanding of societal issues and societal, I suppose issues and situations. So yeah, I think it does. I think it's hugely positive.
That's really good to hear, because I think some people kind of fear that kind of change in themselves as a person as being a negative thing, but it's actually great to hear that it can be a massively positive influencing factor.
Sorry, someone said if you want a job done quickly, give it to a working mum, and I think that as well. I think no one has handled crisis better than a busy working mum. When you're
so
dropping
true.
someone and you're taking a call, or you've been told by the nursery you need to be back within 10 minutes, you will make that happen. So I think it's, there's a lot to be said for those kind of skills you learn from being a parent as well.
Conflict. It's amazing how effective you can become.
Exactly. do that. Conflict resolution with toddlers. I mean, who knew?
I'm right in the thick of that at the moment. I guess similarly, is there a sort of an influence that having a successful career has had on you as a parent as well? You know, being a working mum clearly, well, hopefully makes you a good role model for your daughters too, which I feel like is really important. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm very conscious of being a female role model to my daughters. And yeah, I think it does. I think you are able to, doing this particular job for nearly 19 years, it's kept me very relevant. I think I've really enjoyed, obviously I learn from my children as well, so them both being kind of Gen Z now, I'm test checking a lot of things, so you're learning that way. It's starting to learn from them, but I think, yeah, I think there's huge importance in terms of bringing that to my girls and saying that there is an alternative way. You don't have to have your career and then have your children, or have your children then have your career. There are lots of options, and maybe they don't want children, I don't know, maybe they don't want a career. All of these things are fine, but there are ways and different ways of carving your own path. And I think when I was growing up, there was very much a view that you did your career, you might meet a nice man, you get married, and then later on you'd have children. I mean, I wasn't married to my husband when we had our children, and I was a little bit younger actually, so it kind of changed things around a bit, but that's absolutely fine. There will always be a way to get there in the end. And I think people get kind of tied up in this 2.4 children approach to things.
Yeah, the right way to do things. And actually, we all know that women in particular, their careers are quite often, they call them the squiggly career path, and it's not a linear thing. And you can go backwards and forwards and sideways, and it doesn't matter.
You can change career. And I also think going part-time, as I did, I think it's often perceived as a step backwards, and it so isn't. You shouldn't feel like you've been sidelined. I know one of our team, I was asking them yesterday, and they were like, they very much felt that when they became a parent, they were being sidelined. Not in my organisation, I'm keen to add, but it's not true. It enables you to maybe then come back fighting later on, and really going for it. It's just about you choosing the path that works for you and your family. And there are many options. It's a long old career, so you can do what you want when you want. And I firmly believe that now. I don't think we have the same issues we had 20 years ago.
Thankfully, that's good.
Yes.
I read in the latest PR Week Power book that you're keen to carve out a bit more time for personal growth, and I saw even perhaps learn a new sport or language. I think it's really important for anyone, and particularly parents who spend so much of their time doing things for other people, to find time for themselves. Is that something that you quite proactively try and do in terms of finding time for personal development still?
Yes, it's hard, I'd say that, because but it's getting easier for me. My youngest is 10, so I am getting more time, and I'm less tired because they're sleeping well through the night and everything. But yeah, I mean, I'm inspired by Nikki for that. So Nikki's learning Italian.
Oh wow.
So she is, and actually she shares her Duolingo scores, and she's doing a brilliant job. I obviously did French at university, so I'd love to revisit that. And yeah, I try, and without sounding really boring, do a bit of gardening.
It's important.
I am keen to learn a new sport, but it's just finding the right one. I'm a bit too flitty. I kind of go from fad to fad. But it is, but again, I really caution you don't beat yourself up if you can't, because again, I don't want to sound like one of those awful people that I get up at 5 and I do my yoga.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
There's days where you cannot fit another thing in. There really is. But it's about prioritizing, and I think being really clear that it isn't a failing if you don't put the kids' wash on that night. It will be fine. It can be done in the morning.
It'll be done at some point.
If you want to then go and take yourself out for a walk or read a book, that's better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Finally, I just want to ask about your advice for new parents or parents of young children in the PR industry. Like you said, your youngest is now 10, so you're kind of getting to that phase where I guess they're slightly more independent, nearly. But what about for those of younger children that still want to have a fulfilling, successful career, but also want to still be a great mum and be present at home? What would be your advice to those people?
I think be very clear on what you want to achieve each week, and just try and kind of stick to that, and don't beat yourself up if you don't. But carve out time for networking if you can. I know it's not always easy, but do kind of be quite proactive in that. Look for mentoring, a massive plug for the Women in PR mentoring scheme. It is incredible. Or even if that isn't appropriate, so there might be a sponsor, because if you don't want to mentor, you can have a sponsor within your organisation. Find ways that you can learn from other people who've been there, particularly in your organisation. If they've been a parent further down the line, how did they make it work? Were there ways they could ask for more flexibility in terms of, when they start work or when they drop off their children or pick up? It's those kind of things. I think conversations are key. You never know what's out there until you start talking to people. I've always said, if you just try and have conversations with as many people as possible, that everyone's really willing to give you their own thoughts and advice. So just see if there's something that you like as a role model, then take that back to your company, ask. There is no manual to having children, and there's no manual to having children and a career. I think we are shown lots of people who have very lots of support at home or are able to have that meteoric rise. That's not really the norm. The norm is just finding what works for you. And I think knowing that will change year on year as your child gets older or their requirements change. Or you might find things get harder. Two of my children have got neurodivergent diagnosis, so sometimes that needs more time put into it. So just know that it's not, as I think we talked about the squiggly career, just know that it's okay to change things. If they're not working for you, they might work with you for a period of time, but it's okay if they don't after that year or whatever. Change it again, look at new ways of doing things.
I think that's really great advice, and thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. It's been very inspiring. Great to hear how you've done it, and like I say, you've done a fantastic job, and both in terms of raising children and having a successful career, and that's a brilliant place to be in. So thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you very much, Alex.
No worries.